Hi, Eugene. Thank you so much for joining Depeche and I today at Innovate and Grow. I would love to start by just getting an introduction from yourself, your background, and Chainstack as well.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, guys. My name is Eugene. I'm a CTO and founder at Chainstack, the leading Web3 infrastructure company. We started Chainstack as a personal pain relief when we built a product on blockchain in 2018. It was super early. Ethereum just kicked off, and everybody was really excited about building things that are mutable. And I was working in a data protection company called Acronis at that time. And the idea was quite simple. Let's timestamp the objects that people, back up, for instance, or they want to proof of existence in the future. Let's put the hashes of these objects on the blockchain, and let's then have a very sleek, website where people can say, okay, and can provide a proof. Okay, this object existed at this moment of time. And here's the proof, and here's the timestamp, and here's the link to the blockchain with a relevant hash. And we started building it, and of course we needed some infrastructure to do reads and writes to the smart contracts and to write transactions from this product. And as a reminder, Acronis at that point was quite big company already, so there was a real usage. So it was not a startup at that point. There was hundreds of thousands of end users, and so whenever they, try to use the product, it always hit our infrastructure, and it was very flaky. So at that point, running a blockchain node was something very obscure and exotic, and it always broke. And we decided, okay, this is a very exciting industry for sure. Why don't we build a managed, hosted API service for all these blockchains? Our thesis was multi-chain. It was before there was any sort of multi-chain thesis in Web3, we said, okay, there will be a lot of blockchains. And that's how we started Chainstack. We said, okay, we will run hosted services for all these blockchains that will be built in the next, tens of years. So that was our thesis that we started with, and we're still running with it. I'm very happy that we've foreseen this multi-chain thesis pretty early on, because, the multi-chainness of our product is one of the core pillars of our, product strategy. And we plan to continue leveraging on this. And I'm very happy that we've seen it very early on when there was pretty much nothing aside from Bitcoin and Ethereum in the world.
Well, Eugene, as you started out, right, that it was a sort of a Chainstack was born out of the own problem, right? That, okay, you're trying to use Geth, parity, they were not so reliable, and hence we start building a proper infrastructure around it, which eventually became into Chainstack. And now I'm just want to sort of zoom out, maybe just on Web3 point of view, because in Web3, it's essentially not just the RPC, but there are a lot of these things, right? There are the indexers, and now there is, the AVS that's coming up. Do you witness the flaky behavior generally in even today, which is like, okay, we have gone from 2018 to 2024. RPC itself maybe have stabilized, that the infrastructure for RPC is stabilized, but is it, first of all, for all blockchains still the same? Can we say that? Can we generalize it, or can we not? And then for these other services which are now ancillary to the main blockchain itself, what's the status of those?
Sure. I think that some things have been more mature than 5 years ago when we started building and running the company actively. Some of the stable things are those that have been running in production for a while, and that's the only way to mature things in general. I think in the world, there should be some time in the market for certain things so that they get better, they get higher quality, they get more stable. Hence, whatever is in the production for, like half a dozen years, like Ethereum, Bitcoin, maybe some other blockchains, like maybe Polygon, maybe a couple of others, I would say they are quite mature and stable. And in fact, if you are, let's say, mono blockchain application on Ethereum, for you managing infrastructure is actually not that hard, because inherently all these pieces are quite stable as of today. Of course, everything is just by, comparison with something else. So it's relatively stable. Of course, there are still glitches here and there. Whenever there's a new version of the node, because there's also plurality of clients and different, clients behave differently. And so there are all sorts of nuances, but largely speaking, it's quite stable, which you cannot, of course, say about some things that have not been in the market for a while. And for instance, if you take some newer blockchains, of course, it's flaky still. And for the new, piece of technology, of course, it's flaky still, because there hasn't been, time in the market for those technologies to mature and to have some sort of battle tested, load and so on and so forth. And I think it's a normal cycle for such, new technologies. But of course, there's still a big chunk of flakiness, I would say. And the only things that are stable are those that have been with us, for half a decade at least, I would say.
I find it a bit surprising, but then at the same time, sort of in a dilemma that should just be accepted as normal, that there are things in the Web3 ecosystem which are flaky. When essentially the amount of capital that flows into this industry, and especially maybe what you read so much on crypto Twitter and the other media platforms around blockchain, it doesn't come out so much. So there are things which are patchy and there are things which are completely stable. So I'm just kind of always in a dilemma. How is it at this state that with so much of capital inflow, we're still somewhere struggling with that?
I think the level of disconnect in our industry is remarkable between, the capital inflow and the reality. And of course, it's all fueled also by our era of social media on steroids and, hard ways to find actual truth. But I'd say that, what I learned also over these years, that, whatever you read in Twitter or whatever you read in news is probably, just tip of the iceberg, the best. And, it doesn't necessarily even need to be the truth. And so the level of disconnect, I think, is remarkable, because also this industry is all driven by narratives, by short-term narratives, by trading. And so it's important for, actors in this ecosystem to create the short-term visibility that, gives them attention and gives them proper way to, market their products or whatever they build, basically, if not products, but tokens, etc. So I would say that, unfortunately for, the stability and the foundations of Web3, most of this capital doesn't actually come into engineering. And so it's largely, dispersed somewhere else, and engineering and, product doesn't necessarily receive a big chunk of it. If you look at the split of the funds of any, of most of the foundations, for example, that publish their budgets. And of course, we're not even talking about those who don't publish their budgets.
What do you think are the biggest engineering opportunities at the moment to solve?
I think that the most interesting opportunities today are quite boring, because they are not fueled by short-term narratives. And I think it's also quite usually the case in other industries as well. Like what is, like, if you look at AI, for example, or if you look at web in the early days, most of the opportunities that actually drive value are quite boring. Like, what could be more boring than storing files in the cloud, right? Or like running programs on some servers that are on the cloud. It sounds super boring, right? Like, why? Like AWS S3 is the most boring thing ever, and one of the most valuable things ever as well.
I've also found that even with the most technical projects, they still, to try to make it interesting and to communicate it to the average user, they try to build another narrative around that tech, and they try to build a new catchphrase or something to try and make it appealing.
Precisely. So I think there is inverse, basically, dependency on, if technology sounds exciting, most likely it's vaporware. You know what I mean? If technology sounds boring and non-interesting, most likely that's the one that is gonna be used. That's how I sort of judge technology at this point, because if you try to judge all technologies by the fanciness of it and by the number of, buzzwords that are embedded in the, in the punchline, I think that there's like inverse dependency on the excitedness of, the punchline versus the actual use case and real world usage of the technology. So I would say most of the engineering opportunities in Web3 and in AI and in other growing industries are in something that we don't even want to, discuss in Twitter, because there's nothing to discuss. What to discuss? It's not fancy. It's not interesting. It's not exciting to tinker about it, but that's where all the value sits, I think, in reality.
Capital is one of the biggest factors for any company to perform how it performs, right? And capital flows is always drawn towards these narratives, which are maybe
Massive.
vaporware, right? Yeah. And then maybe founders who are stepping into either AI or any other industry or Web3, they do tend to get attracted towards those buzzwords, right? I have to do something in and around that because it's 10x easier to raise capital, and I have to raise capital. It's not that I don't have to. The bootstrapping from day one is probably not even an option in 2024 for any industry. The amount of competition that already exists. And then you're like stuck in this thing, okay, what do I do? Do I build something which I probably think is relevant, but will have to go slow? Or do you go ahead and make that jazzy presentation and get those communities up and running?
Exactly. But so I think it's important to have this conversation in the context of the objectives of founders. You need to ask the founders first, like, what would they like to achieve? Because this will basically outline what needs to be done or what can be recommended for this founder.
Fair enough.
How did you, Eugene, figure out what you wanted? Because the thing is, like, as you first get into entrepreneurship, everyone then tells you to raise venture capital, and then you're immediately put into the bucket of you need to build a unicorn company. How do you actually figure out what you want? How did you do that? We'll go through that process.
It's a great question. And a disclaimer for all of this discussion is that I was, 5 years ago, I was not as wise as today. So whatever I talk about today doesn't mean that it represents my views 5 years ago. Okay. So when I'm saying, okay, ideally every founder should figure out for themselves, it doesn't mean that, before starting a company or something. But for example, I realized that during the process, my objective at that time was to build something from scratch by myself, basically, and amazing people around. So that was my objective, because I always was around someone building something, and like I helped someone building something, and like I took part of building something, but I didn't really build something from. So that was my sole objective at the time. I wanted to build something from scratch, like from zero, and I wanted to give it a shot. I had no idea whether it would work or not. I think I had boring enough idea to start with, and fundamental enough idea to start with, and luckily it was the case in the end. But of course, I didn't, choose the target at that point of time, whether I want to build some, sustainable business for like 20 years, or I want to exit in 2 years. I think it was adjusted over time. And at this point, I think that because we are already a profitable company, I think that at this point, I kind of enjoy building, sustainable businesses, because I see the realization of, long-term customers and long-term employees and good business models and healthy gross margins and so on and so forth. And I really enjoy it because, like, over time, I also think more about sustainability in general in the world. And, in the same way, like we consume, information, or we consume materials, or we consume resources, I think in the same way, the companies should be more sustainable and more, reasonable towards what they spend, how to make money. And so I think I'm just getting old.
I think Web3 is getting older.
And that's a good thing.
If Web3 matures as much as I expect it to do it sooner, then I'll be really good. And with AI, unfortunately, yeah, it's a bit of a thing, right? It's attention gets digressed. Let's put it this way: developers, everything, consumers, developers, capital, everything gets digressed. But on that note, because you mentioned about sustainability and you mentioned about the boring versus the vaporware kind of businesses, right? What is the vision for Chainstack for the next 5 years? And this will obviously, what I'm hoping is that it's not like, okay, what we provide and we'll just add on ancillary services, some other API related gateways. But is there anything more that you sort of believe Chainstack will be fulfilling, because Web3 in itself will be radically changing in the next 5 years?
Right. So our mission continues the same, as to connect all developers to Web3. Not just Web3 developers to Web3, but all developers to Web3. So that's our mission statement that we developed over years. And it's still, it is still the same. How I see the growth in the next 5 to 10 years is by having more developers going into Web3 and Chainstack helping them to actually build their apps faster. The situation today is that there are some developers in Web3, not many developers in Web3. And so how we see it is that we will, so thankfully we started this company and platform quite early on. So I can confidently say it's mature and stable today, which is a good thing, because for those people who are just joining Web3 from, let's say, building Web2 apps, building microservices on AWS, it will be very surprising for them to see some platform that, is flaky, that crashes, that doesn't allow them to run their app with 4 nines reliability, et cetera, et cetera. And so, because we now have this foundation, which is stable and reliable, and with the well-designed, features, with well-designed pricing, which is also quite affordable at this point, because luckily we also have competition that is very good for the industry, because the price is getting more balanced over time. So that's how I see it. Apart from just talking about features, etc., I see it as a foundation to onboard the actual majority of developers that we all want to see. So what is sort of being missed, which is just behind our eyes, is that we should not market our products to all the same Web3 developers that exist today. And this especially goes to those guys who are protocols, for example, like protocols, chains. What I believe they should market their platforms and solutions to is to non-Web3 developers. And like next week there will be Token 2049, Solana Breakpoint in Singapore. Very exciting, and there will be a lot of people coming there. But it's kind of all the same soup that we've been operating within. So some protocols are better with this. Some protocols are not that far-sighted. But let's say the ideal target should be Web2 developer. For us and for protocols and chains in particular, they need to go to Web2 developer conferences and attract talent there by explaining why is it good to build their apps not on AWS, not on WordPress, not on Shopify, not on all of this amazing platforms that are incredibly stable, incredibly mature, very feature rich. Why would they go and build applications on Solana blockchain? Why would they go and build applications on Polygon chain? Why would they go to build applications on Telegram Open Network, right? And so that's, I think, the key. And once we unlock this motion, I think we will see an incredible influx of developers, which we've never ever seen, and we always dreamt about. And this will happen at some point, because there are some objective differences and differentiators for blockchain-based apps versus non-blockchain-based apps for particular use cases that some of them we already know, and they realize themselves at DeFi, for example, prediction markets, a couple of others. And for some, we haven't even realized yet. Let's say my personal, favorite use case that I struggle every day is ticketing. I hate ticketing as it is today for events. WebEx haven't bright age of ticketing, which we should move onto the next phase, which should be nice and clean and fair. And that's where I think, for example, Web3 and blockchain can definitely help. But then, we need to go and attract people who build, ticketing startups to say, guys, don't build it, on Amazon, build it on Solana.
So is your thesis that, because at the moment there's a limited amount of consumers in Web3, or let's say daily active users, is your thesis attracts more developers, build more applications, then the consumers will come?
So my thesis is kind of vice versa, is that, originally you need to find some scenarios which can be usable by large amounts of people. And it's not about onboarding even as users to Web3. It's not about UX. It's just about what would they be interested to do, right? Or where we can go from 0 to 1 in the experience. Let's say in ticketing, we can for sure go from 0 to 1, for example. I'm convinced, and we will get there regardless what I say. In certain amount of years. Some experiences are completely new, right? Like NFTs are completely new type of experiences. For example, we've never seen them before in the past. Quite interesting mechanic, yet to realize for the majority of people. So first, we need to find these compelling scenarios for people to actually want to use anything on blockchain rails. So it's either new experience that they've never ever seen before, and it unlocks some new opportunities, or second, it's something that improves from 0 to 1. I think they're broadly these two categories of scenarios. And then when we identify these scenarios, once these compelling scenarios are identified, let's go and build a bunch of apps. Let them compete, let them die, let them succeed, etc. But I think just investing into developers and expecting them to build some useful apps, I think this narrative is already dead. I think it's been tried by many different, very well-capitalized organizations in our industry. Let's give these guys a 50K grant. Let's give these guys 100K grant. Let them build whatever on our chain. I think we can confidently say it's a failed attempt to fuel the growth. It doesn't work. Because, it's more or less free money for these developers, and they can get a grant there and get a grant there. It's not going to work. And as we see, it doesn't work really. Even if you look at the Singapore market, most of the successful Web3 companies are actually not built that way. Why? Because, of the incentives.
I'm trying to digest that. I'm still trying to think because I've been also in the blockchain space since 2017, and I don't have stopped counting how many cycles of ups and downs has gone through, right? But honestly, it's not. We sometimes take it as a joke, but I think now I'm so irritated that it should not be considered a joke. A lot of my friends and family, right? They just don't understand what I do, right? It in fact is a party joke that Ken Dipesh explained to us what he does. And I find it, this is interesting. After so many years, my circle itself has absolutely zero interest in understanding Web3 and blockchain. I'm pretty much sure that under the hood, behind the curtains, 80%, 90% of think it's a sham. Right? They always count me as one of the guys who's just probably selling Bitcoins and making money from an Amway scheme or something like that. And that's disappointing because how do you go ahead and tell what is Web3? I mean, it's not about just me. I think as an industry, either where is this going, right? Where is that thing of what do you pick up? Because you can attract a developer. Okay, don't build on AWS, build on a blockchain with smart contracts and other stuff. But let's say we surpass all of that thing. As a developer saying that, okay, go ahead, build a ride-hailing app, which exists, by the way, right? There is an Uber on blockchain, which talks about better pay structure for drivers and all that thing. It's only sad that they don't have a pickup, right? They don't have these adoption in the market. And obviously, I don't know what's the problem. Obviously, they don't know what's the problem. But there's this situation, right, that the developers or the teams would not want to build because consumers are not willing to adopt. Consumers are saying the other way around, saying that there is nothing that we should go and adopt.
No, I think, in fact, there's nothing wrong with this situation. Why? Because you are in the B2B domain of this industry, and B2B businesses are generally hard to explain to normal people. There is a lot of startup comedy about B2B, explaining my job in B2B startup, explaining my job as a product manager, etc. It's just hard to explain. And so what I do, for example, I just tell I work in software.
I always say I work in tech.
Well, tech, yeah. It's even higher abstract. I say I work in software. They say, what kind of software? I say, we run like APIs in the cloud. There's no question, because that's what we do exactly. Like which kind of APIs we run on the cloud is completely unnecessary details for 99% concession. And also the second thing is that B2B software is just hard to explain, and it's all right. It's totally fine. Like go and try to explain. If you work in Datadog, go and try to explain to your mom what you do. Mom, I work in a cloud startup that ingresses logs from different sources so that then people can analyze logs from different microservices on the cloud. It's completely nonsense.
Yeah.
Like the complete nonsense.
Fair enough.
So as I said, so I think it's fine. There's no problem here. The problem is that we kind of try to, onboard people to blockchain, which is exactly the same as like, let's onboard people to the cloud.
Right.
But what the hell does that mean? Why would people get onboarded to the cloud?
Yeah.
Like people are not onboarded to the cloud. They're onboarded to maybe some SaaS applications that are built on top of the cloud. And that's what everybody's excited about. Oh, I have some neobank app, and now I can, use some mobile app that allows me to transfer money between continents, seamlessly via nicknames.
Yeah.
I'm excited about this e-commerce that allows me to receive food within 2-hour windows, whenever I order. This is the stuff people are excited about. And, whether it works on Web3, on the cloud, on the server underneath my table, it's like this irrelevant details in the same way like you explain your job to your mom if you work in B2B software.
I do think you're starting to see like different projects when they almost like your monads, right? Where they have communicated or built a community around a more simplified external product, which is their character in a sense. Again, it's like they haven't necessarily massively sold the benefits of being a part of the ecosystem, but as a user, as a consumer, you can quite easily see, okay, I want to join this cult-like community. I want to be a part of this. Whereas you have other chains launching nowadays, and they're just so focused on the technicals that no one can even understand how it's going to benefit them as a user.
I think that for chains and for platforms, it's important to build your developer community. So I'm convinced that it's very important to attract developers. And again, some chains are very successful there. For instance, like Solana, in my opinion, is very successful in attracting developers, and the branding is amazing, and the way they like structure the super teams, I think, is quite clever, and so on. So it's very good. However, there is always there are two sides of this marketplace. Developers build apps for consumers. Consumers need many apps for productivity in their daily lives, basically. And so we collectively as an industry, I think we are just a little stuck with the lack of this, other side on the market, which is basically people using these apps. It's imagine that Amazon would not exist as a marketplace, for e-commerce. And then this company would decide to build a storage solution in the cloud, like just out of nowhere. Like let's build storage solution in the cloud. We need scalable storage in the cloud to store something, to store, objects. And there is no Amazon.com who needs this like massively. And so that's kind of the situation where we're in. There's a lot of, storage and compute and abundant block space, but there's no e-commerce. So it's empty space. There's a lot of things that you can, utilize, but utilize for what?
Okay, so my next question is, Eugene, if you had to tomorrow go out and build a new startup, like day one, what would be the first 5 things that you would do? Like imagine that Chainstack isn't in the picture. Like, how would you go about it?
So luckily, I've learned so much over this, startup journey. And so I would do things completely differently from what I've done with Chainstack. And probably the right question is, what are the top things I would not do? Because I would actually not do so many things that I've done. Like I would, for instance, not go and start marketing, my product before I have early customers that has proven the point of this, product in existence.
I can also attest to this. Some of the projects that we work with, when we get brought in at too early stages, we find we're doing market research for them, not marketing. Because what they need is market research, and they need to find their users, understand their pain points, and they think they need marketing, but they actually just need to figure out their product first.
We did this mistake, unfortunately, but we learned from it, which is great. So we had a product with no PMF, with no product market fit, which we started aggressively marketing like something that, is a real deal. Like everybody needs it. Everybody needs a platform to host their blockchain. And it was in Google everywhere. Like, you find for an enterprise blockchain, you search for like blockchain APIs. Nobody searched for that, but we marketed for it, and we made Google even richer than it was already. So typical mistake, like you need to be following your finances very closely, because it's easy to get lost into it. We have abundant, amount of information about how to build things. Unfortunately, most of the information comes from people who have never built things. Just stop doing typical things and start with bare minimum. Try to find the right people for the job. Identify what are the, few jobs to be done, not many. You cannot do 10 jobs efficiently at the same time. You can probably do just a handful of jobs. Find the right people for this job. Presenting yourself online if you're a software business, and then just going and selling the product, even if it doesn't exist. But selling not by promoting it in Google search, by selling by going into talking to people and trying to find out whether this makes sense at all.
So keep it bare minimum is what you're trying to say. That just don't need to fall for the typical showbiz things that float around. Build stuff which is good. Go ahead and sell and focus on one thing more or less, and try not to ramp up for unnecessary reasons. The team, fair enough.
One of my favorite memes is, like the left curver and then the right curver meme. Sometimes I think we always try to do, and I've fallen into this trap, I always try to do things the smartest way possible. And so I'm like, okay, we need to do it in X, Y, because like, this is going to get the best result and no one else is doing this. And like, it's going to make us stand out so much. Like, I overcomplicate it so much, but the reality is the answer is right in front of you. It's the simple thing. It's the boring thing, but it's right in front of you.
I think that it's even more that I think most of us, we try to do smart thing, which is right curve, but we end up in the middle because we haven't read enough. We haven't seen enough. We haven't done enough. So basically, instead of doing the right curve thing, we're doing the mid curve, which is the most stupid thing to do. I mean, I'm doing it all the time. I'm trying really hard to avoid doing it. So at least I'm trying to do the stupidest thing possible now, And perhaps I still do it closer to the mid curve because I cannot just say, okay, I'll just do it in the most dumb way. And I'm trying to think more. Oh, what about attention to details? What about this nuance? What about that nuance? And then you end up still like closer to the mid curve. But at least you try not to reinvent everything like from scratch. You're like, okay, let's do it like in the super mega smart way possible. And because if you try to do stupid, at least you don't burn much resources. Yes, you still burn some resources for this, like sort of if you have like perfectionism or whatever, you still burn some time for this. But if you try to build it complex from the ground up, then you burn some time for just because it's complex, and then you burn a lot of time because you want to make it also perfect. So it's like lose.
Okay, so my next question is, what are your current priorities at Chainstack, particularly over the next like 1 to 2 years?
So great question. So we focus very much on the existing products that bring value to our customers and making them as perfect as we can with regards to all key aspects of these products that are important to our customers, namely reliability, performance, and price. These are all super boring things again, but they are very important to the customers and that use our product and rely on it every day. So we're improving on these three categories all the time, and this is our key focus on our products, namely nodes and subgraphs. These are two major products that we have that are mostly being used. Second thing we do, we are putting a few eggs in different baskets, and they are purely focused on the user adoption. At this point, I'm personally not being sold on any technological advancement of Web3 at all. So I'm like super bored when today I'm reading materials about new blockchains and how fast they are, how XYZ they are. I'm not interested, not sold on this. So all my headroom is in the consumer adoption. So we're having a few bets on the consumer adoption and working towards them. So hopefully they will bring fruit in the next few years. So these are two major things we do generally. We focus on what's important for our current customers and focus on a couple of things that we believe can bring more users to the space.
And what is the best way for people to support yourself and Chainstack?
Of course, use Chainstack. So as we've just observed on Depeche, this connection, using a reliable provider is important for everything that we use online, especially for mission critical services such as decentralized applications, smart contracts, and the users who are interacting with them. So of course, the best way is to tinker with our platform, give feedbacks. We always have some sort of coupon running. Currently, there's a Solana hackathon called Raider. We're offering, if you're interested in building real world applications on Solana, feel free to register on the hackathon. It will be ongoing for a few weeks. We're offering completely free Chainstack subscription for 3 months. All the hackathon participants, because we want to support newcomers in the space who want to build real apps for real users with a completely free infrastructure to kick things off. I'm generally in Singapore, so I'm happy to meet with people in Singapore. I always, whenever I learn in our industry or around that somebody's from Singapore, I try to get them for coffee and just talk personally, because I think that's the best way to know each other, to meet face to face. So whoever is in Singapore, next week is the perfect week. Probably the podcast will not be yet. But regardless, whoever is in Singapore, willing to chat, I'm always open for a coffee in the morning. And yeah, let's build more apps for people. And whoever has any ideas, feel free to reach out. I will be more than happy to help on a free basis, and because I just want to see our industry to bear fruit and bring more people on board without knowing that they're using Web3 or blockchain, but just using some amazing experiences that allow them to improve their lives.
Thank you so much, Eugene, for joining Depeche and I.
Thank you.
My pleasure.